So I guess the first time I had ever been introduced to a substance was like 12 or 13, and I ended up drinking alcohol at my parents' house. Everybody was asleep, and it was me and my sister. And my sister had drank before, but I hadn't. And I ended up going in the fridge, and there was like a bottle of something, and I ended up drinking like half of it and getting really drunk and loving the way I felt. And but the next day I was really, really sick because I drank so much. I never drank before. I was puking in the shower. My mom was asking, "What's wrong with you?" And then, of course, she found that the bottle of alcohol was gone. So that was really my first introduction to drugs, alcohol being a drug to me. I guess even before that, though, I had smoked cigarettes. Probably around the age of 8 or 9, I had started smoking cigarettes. And by the time I was 12 or 13, I was smoking cigarettes regularly. So I guess cigarettes really would have been my first introduction to drugs. By the time I was 14, I started smoking marijuana. I only did it once when I was 14. And then by the time I was 15, I started smoking pot every day. I mean, who doesn't love smoking pot when you first start, if you're an addict like me? So, you know, I was in school at the time. I was in 10th grade, and I just kind of didn't really want to go to school anymore, so I decided to drop out. It was the beginning of my 10th grade year, and I dropped out. And you know, I thought, well, hey, I'm a lot smarter than these people, and I don't need to be here, so why am I here? So I'm just going to go home and smoke pot. And so that's what I did. I went and took a practice GED and stuff. Was going to do the GED thing. I ended up continuing to smoke pot for the next few years. I ended up getting my GED, and I started Montgomery College when I was 17. Would have been my senior year, and so I started going to college, and I thought everything was okay. Between the time of 15 and 17, though, I was doing a lot of ecstasy and Adderall. I'd gotten introduced to pills like Percocet, and it was, you know, it was just a tumultuous relationship. I just up and down. I would do it for binges for days, and then I'd tell myself, no, I can't do this anymore. Why am I doing this? And I'd always just keep telling myself, I'm just going to smoke pot. I'm just going to smoke pot. And you know, sometimes that worked, and sometimes it didn't. I ended up, you know, binging on other harder substances. But really, the problem wasn't you know, the other substances or the pot. It was really within myself, which I was later to find when I finally got clean. So when I was 17, I was in college, and it would have been my senior year of high school, and I was kind of like, you know, didn't really fit in because people were kind of older, and you know, of course, I found all the druggies in class so that I could get high with them, and I ended up doing coke my first time, and I ended up missing one of my finals, and I had an A in the class, and I failed the class with an A because I didn't take the final. And so, like, there were all these signs throughout my recovery that should have been like, danger, danger, Will Robinson. But you know, I just, at that point in time, it was fun, and I was enjoying my life, and so. Or so I thought. So I thought. So I ended up staying at Montgomery College, and so I did coke one time, and I didn't touch it for a few years, and I just continued to smoke marijuana, and started selling pot around the time I was 18, and I ended up dating this guy, and he was living with me, and it ended up going south, and so I ended up in the hospital because I had a really bad time with it, and I tried to get clean at that point in time, but it only really worked for like 3 months, and because I was just really scared to go back to the hospital. So I was like, I won't eat anything with alcohol in it. I'm not going to do anything ever again, and blah 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 blah. But eventually, I started hanging out with the same people again, and you know, they were smoking pot, and I always thought, well, pot isn't the problem, you know, it's not the pot, it's not the pot. So I ended up smoking pot again. And so from the time I was 19 to 22, I started selling pot again out of my parents' house. I'd gotten back into using ecstasy, back into Adderall, Percocet. I just have binges in certain periods of time, would be this drug or that drug. So for this many months, I'd be on this drug, and then for the next 3 months, I'd be on that drug. And pot was the overarching drug of choice. You know, I would smoke pot from the time I got up in the morning until I went to bed, and I couldn't survive without pot. or so I thought. You know, I just didn't think I could live without it, and I wouldn't go on vacation. And when I would go on vacation with my parents, I'd bring enough, you know, to smoke, and a fear of running out and not having enough. And it's funny because when people talk about harder substances, I can really relate. Even though pot, you know, some people is kind of a joke, but to me it was like crack. You know, it was very similar. The mental addiction to it was really sad. You know, and so I ended up continuing to use drugs and selling pot and hang out with the same people and just kind of staying at Montgomery College. I would take some classes, drop some classes, take some more classes, drop some classes, and I really wasn't going anywhere. I had started a mental health program, which is kind of like the beginning of a social work program, and I was always the kind of person who thought, well, I'm gonna be a drug counselor, except I'm gonna be the drug counselor who smokes pot. Makes sense, right? So it made sense to me, at least at the time, and so I continued with my schooling, but I was unable to really go anywhere. And eventually, it got to the point where I'd gotten introduced to a cocaine dealer, and you know, I really liked uppers, so I started doing a lot of cocaine because I had the access, and it progressed, and I eventually, you know, ended up doing it a lot, and I really loved it until I started realizing that it was really making me depressed, and that like I just wasn't myself, and I started realizing like I wasn't really going anywhere in life, and I had been in, you know, Montgomery College for 5 years, and you know, what was I doing? And so I kind of just I asked my parents for help one day, and but then I quickly recanted, and I said, no, I'm not going to treatment. It was just that one time. I just was going a little crazy, but I don't need any help. And unbeknownst to me, they were kind of behind my back, and they were planning an intervention. And so during this time, I was still, you know, smoking pot in their house, selling drugs out of their house, you know, having people come in and out of the house. I'm really lucky that I'd never gotten arrested for selling drugs, because the stuff that I did was it was blatantly obvious to anybody who lived in my neighborhood, and I didn't care. All I cared about was I just want to stay high. Like, I had so much pain inside, and I just didn't know how else to cope with it, and so I just used drugs. I'd always known that I was gay, and that was always an issue with me, and I was very religious, so you know, my religion told me that I was wrong and evil and that God hated me, and so I kind of was like, well, screw God, you know, like, I mean, if God hates me anyways, I might as well just keep getting high and enjoy this life, because, you know, my afterlife, there is no point. You know, what's the point of this life then? So, so I think a large part of my use was really a lot of self-hatred and inability to accept myself, and it wasn't something that I really learned to do until I got clean, and I'm really grateful that I got clean, because, you know. So anyways, back to how I got clean. I ended up having an intervention. My parents ended up having an intervention one morning. I was up all night snorting cocaine, and I was out at a club, and I was with a friend, and we took the metro home, and I was snorting cocaine on the metro, and I just didn't even care. I was like, I was that insane. I used to smoke pot like in the streets of Montgomery College. Like, anyway, so I was on my way home, and my friend's like, Andrew, you need to chill out. And the next morning when I woke up, she woke me up at like 8 a.m. and I was up until 3 or 4. She goes, Andrew, come downstairs. And I'm like, what do you want? Like, I'm sleeping. And so I ended up being like, okay. And for some reason, I looked at her and I said, am I having an intervention? And I just find that to be the weirdest thing. I mean, I guess, because I knew I'd been talking to my parents, but it's so weird to me that it was like something inside me just knew, like. So I got up, and I was walking downstairs, and I started smelling cigarette smoke. And my parents never smoke in the house, so I'm thinking, what is going on? And I come downstairs, and I turn the corner, and there is this guy sitting in my living room. He goes, "Hi, my name's Norm. I'm your interventionist, and there's a bunch of people here who care about you." And I was just freaked out. I was like, "Hi, I'm a real nice guy, so I was polite." And he's like, "Will you sit down?" And I said, "Sure." And so they started the intervention. He was just, telling me about how my family really cared about me and how they really wanted, to see me get some help. And so they started the letter reading, if you know anything about interventions. And my younger sister was sitting next to me, and she just started reading her letter and crying. And so I broke down. I couldn't, once she was done reading her letter, I just broke down, and I put my head in my hands, and I just cried and cried and cried. And I don't know how long I sat there for, but it was like this struggle in my head, and I was like, I should go. I don't want to go. I can't go. I'm going. I'm not going. I'm going. I'm not going. And I had all this inner dialogue going on. And so I just started praying, and I was like, God help me, God help me, God help me. And just something was like, go, go. And today I kind of see that as my higher power. I don't know if I would call it God or the universal spirit or something inside me. It changes day to day, but whatever that greater power is in the universe, kind of pushed me in that direction. And I lifted my head up and I said, I'll go. So everybody was cheering, and it was like, yay. And so I was like, hey, it's time to take shots and smoke a blunt and, get really screwed up before I go to rehab, because it's my last thing. So I got really high, and we drove to the airport, and my interventionist ended up getting me a first-class flight, and so I drank my entire way there. They cut me off on the first flight, and then I got on the second flight, and then they cut me off on the second flight, and I was really sick when I got there, and I got to California, and that was one of the ways that my parents convinced me to go, because they'd always wanted to go to California, and so they got me a rehab in California. How could I say no to that? So we landed. I ended up going into Detox for a few days. While in Detox, I kind of, was very observant of the other people, and people were like, well, let's just jump the fence, like we can go get high. And it was kind of like, I had always been very sheltered, so thank God that I had, because I was too scared to just go, with these people. And my last drug that I used was in Detox. I was on a lot of benzos, and so they had to detox me off of those. And the last Valium that they gave me, I ended up going to the bathroom and snorting it. And so that was the last time I used. I chose my clean date to be February 25th of 2008. It could be a day or two before, a day or two after. I never really went back and found out. And today, it really doesn't matter to me, because the fact of the matter is that I'm not using today. And so if it was the 24th or the 26th, it really doesn't matter. So I went into a 30-day program after Detox, or actually it was 28 days. And that was an experience. We had to make our beds and sweep and do all these chores, and I learned how to do laundry and things I had never done before, because I lived at home with mommy and daddy, and who needed to do any of those things, right? So I think it really taught me about kind of taking care of myself in ways that I should have known at that time. I was 22, and I should have known how to do these things, but drugs had inhibited me from learning how to do these things. And so it was a good experience. And when I was about to get out, they wanted me to go into sober living, and they told me that I was going to use if I didn't go into sober living. And so I was really, really fearful. I didn't want to go back to what I had been through. And but I had grown some, because before I left, I had hid some paraphernalia in my room, and I'd called my mom from rehab halfway through, and I said, look, this is where it is. You need to get rid of it. Like, I'm serious about this. I really want to stay clean. Like, I don't want to use again. And 12-step programs talk about a spiritual experience, and I think I've had many of them, and I think that's one of them. Just that kind of like, I came back to reality, and I realized, like, oh, I'm myself now again, and I'm not this like drug-crazy fiend. Like I became myself, and I realized, oh, this is not who I want to be. So when I got out of rehab, they recommended me to this sober living house. I declined, and they said, you're going to use, and so I decided to prove them wrong. and I've stayed clean, even though I didn't end up doing exactly what they told me. But on my way to the airport, the driver guy who was also in recovery, told me, he was like, "Look, I know you're not taking their suggestion, but I would recommend, go to a meeting when you get home. Find meetings that you like. Go to a meeting every day for 90 days. Get a sponsor, work the steps, and just don't pick up." And so when I got back, I immediately went to a meeting, and it ended up being AA, and I met some people, and then I met this woman that I was like, oh, she's cool, so I ended up asking her to be my sponsor, and so she was my sponsor for the first like 6 months, and it really helped me to kind of get connected to other people in recovery, and she actually introduced me to people down in Virginia and took me to some of these parties, and I started realizing that I could have fun in recovery, and something I never could even fathom before I stopped using. I mean, having fun before was, getting high or going to get drugs to get high. And even when I went out to do stuff like go and play pool or go bowling or go swimming, like I'd have to bring enough pot, or I'd have to be coked up enough, or, it was just pathetic, and so I started to learn how to have fun in recovery and how to do things that normal people do. And so she was my sponsor for about 6 months to 9 months, and then I got introduced to Narcotics Anonymous, and that was where I kind of found my home, I guess. I really related to the stories of drug use. Although today, I mean, when I look back at it, I abused alcohol too. And to me, a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug, whether it be alcohol or cocaine or marijuana or pills or whatever. They all did the same thing to me. They just made me want more, and they really just decimated my life. And so I ended up moving into NA and kind of finding a sponsor there, and I started working steps with him, and NA has a very, structured workbook for the steps, and I ended up doing step 1, and then my sponsor only went over some of it with me, so I got a resentment, and so I got another sponsor, and then something happened with that sponsor, and I got resentment with him, and I ended up, that was my last sponsor, actually, and it was probably like 2 years ago. So I've got, about 3.5 years, a little over 3.5 years now. And in that time period since those 2 sponsors, I ended up graduating Montgomery College, I think during my first year, and then in recovery. And then I transferred to UMBC, where I started studying social work. And I just graduated in May of 2011 from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Then I applied for an advanced standing at the University of Maryland at Baltimore for the social work program. So they accepted me, and so 24 credits were knocked off of what I would have had to take, and so I only have to take 36 credits. I have an amazing relationship with my sister and my mom and my dad today. I have an older brother who I still kind of have a rocky relationship with because of the religious beliefs and inability to accept me for who I am. And I've learned that I have to put up a boundary to protect myself, which is something I learned in recovery. That not using drugs, I learned that I have the right to bring people into my life who build me up and support me and love me, and all my decisions, as long as they're positive decisions. And so that's been something kind of tough in recovery, is kind of learning who I want in my life and who I don't want in my life. My sister just had a baby 9 months ago, and she's pregnant again, so I can be an uncle today, and be there. And so I just started my graduate program. I'm studying mental health and substance abuse. So one day maybe I can help other addicts. So, I mean, who knows where the road will take me. As long as I stay clean, I can do anything I want.